We want to welcome our partners from the Bechtel Center. We have Junko Perry and Hannah Cho joining us today, and they are the folks you'll get to know during your visa process. They handle all of the visas, not just for the GSB, but for all of Stanford. So they are the subject matter experts in all things immigration. So we're going to turn it over to them. They have a presentation, but if you have questions, we encourage you to reach out and you can raise your hand and we can call on you if you'd like to go and ask directly, or you can put something in the Q&A box, but I think it'll be easier if you just want to raise your hand and ask your questions. But with that, we're going to turn it over to Junko and Hannah for their information on the visa process.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us. I'm going to share my screen. Perfect. Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or good afternoon. I don't know where you are, but my name is Junko Perry. I'm the Assistant Director for International Student Immigration Advising. I'm here with my colleague, Hannah Cho. She's going to be your best friend since she's going to be the one who's going to be issuing your visa documents and answering your questions through email. All right, so we are going to spend just about 10 minutes or so to talk about different visa options for international students and also what you would need to do to get to the United States. As mentioned, we do have plenty of time at the end for Q&A, so you can ask all your questions during that time. I am going to share a lot of information, but you don't have to remember everything. If you can go to our website, bechtel.stanford.edu, and click Arrive on Campus, you will find a lot of useful information there. All right. So let's talk about different visa options for international students. There are mainly two visa types. One is called F1 visa, and the other one is called J1 visa. The restrictions and the requirements are pretty similar. However, there are, of course, certain differences. And there are mainly 3 points. So let's start with the employment. If you are here as F1 students, then you are allowed to work on campus for up to 20 hours a week during academic term and full-time during the school breaks. And in order for you to work on campus, you don't need to apply for work authorization. If you are interested in working off campus, you will be required to obtain work authorization. For F1 students, there are 2 types of work authorization. One is called optional practical training, and the other one is called curricular practical training. During the academic term, students are allowed to work up to 20 hours a week. And during the school break, you'll be allowed to work full-time, more than 20 hours a week. In order for F1 students to become eligible for any off-campus employment, you'll be required to enroll at least 1 academic year, unless you're a CVIS transfer student. Since the MSx program starts in the summer, the earliest you can work off campus as an F1 student is going to be next spring quarter. You have up to 12 months of optional practical training. And also, because MSx program is considered as a STEM major, you have 2 additional years of work authorization that you can apply. It's called STEM OPT extension. So total, you are eligible to work up to 3 years in the United States upon completion of your program. If you're coming here as a J1 student, then you are also allowed to work on campus up to 20 hours a week during academic term and full-time during the school break. Unlike F1 students, you will be required to obtain work authorization to work on campus as a J1 student. If you're coming here as a J1 student and you like to work off campus, you'll be applying for work authorization. It's called academic training. You'll be eligible to apply for up to 12 months of academic training. So the length that you can work in the US is significantly longer if you come here as an F1 student. The other things to keep in mind is that OPT will allow students to be self-employed during the first year of OPT, whereas academic training doesn't. So I know some of the students are interested in starting their own company while in the US. But if you are coming here as a J1 student, you would not be allowed to. Let's move on to funding. If you're coming here as F1 students, you'll be required to show up to at least 3 months, 3/4 of funding. So that would be 3/4 of tuition and 3/4 of living expenses. It can be personal funding or it can be family funding. If you're going to be supported by family funding, then you'll be required to submit the bank statement of your family member along with letter of support. If you're coming here as a J1 student, then you will need to show the proof of funding for the duration of your program. And also, in order for you to become eligible for J1 visa, more than 50% of funding has to come from non-personal funding source. And as I mentioned earlier, we don't have that many J1 students, but those who are here as a J1 students, they are typically sponsored by their government or corporation. All right, let's move on to dependents. If you have a spouse or children who's going to be accompanying you, then they are eligible to apply for dependent visa. If you're going to be here as F1, then your dependents will be eligible to apply for F2 visa. F2 spouse are allowed to study part-time, but they are not allowed to work in the US as F2 dependent. If you're here as a J1 student, your dependent's going to be applying for J2 visa. J2 spouse can study part-time or full-time. And also they're allowed to work in the US once they obtain work authorization. All right. So once you decide which visa that you're going to be applying for, then you can start the process of applying for the visa documents. Now, once you accept the offer and decide to come to Stanford, and as soon as the university publishes the expenses for the next academic year, which usually happens sometime in March, then we are going to send you an invitation for Bechtel Connect. Bechtel Connect is the online portal that students can use to apply for visa documents. If you're going to be coming here as an F1 student, then you're going to be applying for a document called I-20. If you're going to be coming here as a J1 student, then you're going to be applying for visa documents called DS 2019. Once you log into Bechtel Connect, you'll be required to answer some of the information and upload a copy of your passport as well as funding information. Once you submit it, we'll review your information, and if everything is okay, then we are going to issue you I-20 or DS 2019. You're going to receive an email notification when your document is ready. Once you get the email, you simply need to log back into Bechtel Connect, download the document, print it out, and then sign it for your visa appointment or enter into the United States. Along with the email notification, you are going to receive a link to STARS training. All new international students are advised to complete the STARS training because it does talk about what you need to do to obtain a visa, as well as what you need to do once you enter that country to maintain your legal status. Once you have the visa documents, you'll be required to pay one-time CVIS fee. CVIS fee is different from visa application fee, but everyone has to pay for the CVIS fee. For F1 students, it's currently $350. For J1 students, it is $220. And you do need to pay this fee before your visa interview. Once you pay the CVIS fee and obtain the I-20 in this 2019, then you can make an appointment at the U.S. Embassy to go through the visa interview process. And once your visa request is approved, you are going to have a visa in your passport, and then you will be ready to come to the United States. As F1 or J1 students, you'll be allowed to enter the country up to 30 days before the start date that is indicated on the visa, on the I-20 or DS 2019. We do have a step-by-step instruction on what you need to do to request I-20 or DS 2019. So once you get the invitation for Bechtel Connect, I highly recommend you to go to this website. This is a copy of the I-20. So again, if you're applying for F1, you're going to be coming here as an F1 student. This is a document that you need to have to go through the visa process. Once you have the I-20, please do make sure that all the information is correct. If something needs to be updated, then please do let us know. And this is a copy of the DS 2019 for students who's going to be applying for J1 visa. This is the copy of the visa that you are going to receive once your visa request is approved. If you hold a Canadian passport, then you are exempt from going to the U.S. Embassy and applying for a visa stamp in your passport. But instead, Canadian students are required to have all the documents and present them at the port of entry. Again, once you have that visa in your passport, make sure that you do all the information is correct. In order for you to enter the country, these are the documents that you do have to have. Most important document, which is a valid passport. It has to be valid at least 6 months into the future, unless your country has agreement with the United States. So if you know that your passport is going to be expiring soon, then we do advise students to obtain a new passport first, and then apply for F1 or J1 visa. And again, unless you're Canadian, you will need to have a valid F1 or J1 visa in your passport. And then you also have to have an I-20 or DS 2019. It is really important that you do print it out and sign it. You cannot, even though you're gonna receive the digital I-20 or DS 2019, you cannot have the soft copy at the port of entry. So you do need to have the printed out version of the I-20 or DS 2019 to present at the port of entry. You also need to have a proof of funding, and you also need to have an acceptance letter. And again, these are the documents you have to have in hand. So please do not check into your baggage. As I mentioned earlier, F1 students and J1 students are allowed to enter the country up to 30 days before the program start date that is indicated on the DS 2019 or I-20. Sometimes students do need to enter the country earlier than 30 days to visit family members in the US or friends in the US or attend some weddings. You are certainly come to the US more than 30 days before, but you have to enter the country as a tourist first. And then you'll be required to depart the US. And then within the 30 days, you're going to be re-entering the country as F1 or J1 student to start your program. We do have a lot of useful information on our website. Again, go to bechtel.stanford.edu and you can click on Arrive on Campus. Once you enter that country, then you are allowed to remain in the country for the duration of status. For F1 students, of course, while you're studying at Stanford, and then once you complete your program, you have up to 3 years of optional practical training in STEM OPT. So up to 3 years, you can work in the US. And then after OPT in the STEM extension, you have a 60 days of periods called grace period, where you can pack up and go home or go to different institution or change your immigration status. If you're coming here as a J1 student, this is the duration of the status. Once you complete your program, then you have up to 12 months of academic training where you can work in the US in the field of your study. And then after the academic training, you have a 30 days of grace period. We do have a lot of useful information. I'm just gonna put the links up there. If you have any questions, you can always send us email. The email address is new_intl_grads@stanford.edu. When you send us email, please do include your student ID number. We're gonna be dealing with just a little bit over 1,000 new students who are going through this process at the same time. So we want to make sure that we know who you are and that we can give you the appropriate information accordingly. And as I mentioned, we are working with just about 1,000 new international students who are going through the process at the same time. So please do allow us some days to respond to your email. All right, so this is it for the presentation, and we can move on to the Q&A.
All right.
All right.
If anybody has questions, you're welcome to raise your hand or I guess there's also a Q&A box, but let's keep it informal and raise your hand and we'll go through the list. Who wants to kick us off? I think I see Eduardo.
Yes. Can I go first?
Yes,
Go for it.
Yeah. I'd like to know when is our official day at the beginning for the classes? Is it the 7th or the 14th?
Because you will be arriving or it's a mandatory orientation. I think actually they moved the date till July 8th. So
8th.
yes, and I'll probably have to send it to you, Hannah, because the official start date will be July 8th for MSx.
So that'll be the start.
So-
No, the classes don't start to the next week. The official program start date is the 8th because it's required.
So we would be allowed to enter USA in the 9th of June, is it right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Oh, I see Felipe has a question. You want to
Bill?
go for it?
So my case is kind of complex. My wife is pregnant, so we are going to apply with. I have one child that is a born child, but I have an unborn one. So I would like to see how's my case because we are going to apply for my wife and one of my sons, but we're going to have another baby exactly in July. So how's my situation in that case.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
really,
you.
really exciting. So that expected due date is in July, you said?
Yes.
Okay. So that would depends on the situation. So your wife is gonna be accompanying you in July to the States, or
Our
no?
idea is for her to come after the born day. Yeah, we are thinking about maybe August. I'm going to travel alone, and
Okay.
they all the family will join me after I think a month or maybe a month and a half. It depends on how it's all the
Of course.
how everything goes.
Of course.
But as they will come all together, I suppose that my wife and one of my sons will have the visa, but we will have to make all the things to get the other visa. So I just wanted to know how's that process, and will it take a lot of time, knowing that all the other members have the visa. I don't know how does this work.
Hannah, do you want to answer the question?
Sure. So why don't we just start your visa process? So you and your wife and your first baby, and then once you have the second baby, you can add your second baby to the visa. So why don't you just go ahead and apply for the visa first? So make sure that you all have the visa ready. And then once your baby is born, please let us know, and then we're going to issue a visa document, and then you can apply for the baby visa later.
Excellent. In that case, should I be, for example, in Argentina, because they will go if they go through all the process, I imagine that they will have to go to the embassy and everything, but I will not be there. So should I be in Argentina? How's or they can all do all the things without me?
They can do without you.
Okay. And finally, does that take long, or we don't know?
Sorry, could you say it again?
Will that thing they go into the embassy and applying for that missing visa and everything will take a lot of time, or maybe just to make our math about when will they go to or travel to the US?
So the length of the visa process is gonna be different depending on the U.S. embassy or the consulate that you're planning to go. So you will need to check what the average waiting time for the visa process at the U.S. embassy website. But the process itself is the same for you, your wife, your son, your newborn baby. So
Okay, excellent.
Wilson, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I have a quick questions. After graduation, say if I started my own company for the first 12 months, it's okay to stay. But how about the next 24 months? If I'm still starting up my own company, can I stay in the US, or there will be some requirements on the company's revenue or profit in order to be qualified?
yeah, so for STEM OPT extension, you're gonna be self-employed, as I mentioned. There has to be employer-employee relationship. So if you are it, then you can apply for STEM OPT. So at that point, you will need to change your visa to maybe O1 or H1B, different types of visa. If there is an employer-employee relationship, then you can certainly apply for STEM extension, given that the company is registered in a system called E-Verify. But we
Okay.
can definitely talk about it once you get here.
Okay, got it. So there will be some employers in certain industries requirements. You
Mhm.
cannot say work for a restaurant, for example.
Well, yes. So the OPT and the STEM and also academic training, you will be required to work in the field of your study. So working at the restaurant as a bartender, it's not gonna work. Working to learn about how the hospitality industry works or how to run the restaurants, then that might work for your program.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Jose Tomas.
Hi. So if I understood right, first we have to wait for the costs of attendance to update, right? We can't do anything before that. And after that, I read that, and you said also that you need to show proof of funding for visa and the previous process. So my question is, because I read that the financial aid letter should be enough, but it has a component of loans. So the financial aid letter has loans suggestions, but they're not secured yet. So do you have to absolutely secure those fundings, or is it enough just with what shows in that letter?
So the loan is going to be through GSB, right? You're talking about the international student loan, right?
Yes.
Okay, so as long as GSB issues the financial letter, we'll accept it as a kind of approval loan letter. But again, so even though it is the loan supported by the GSB, it's going to be under your funding. So it's going to be personal funding.
Okay, so just to be clear, you don't, just with the letter, with the loans, indications, you were ready to start the visa process. You don't have to terminate the process of actually having the loans ready.
Right. So as long as the GSB Financial Aid Office is issued the letter, we'll accept it as a funding document.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the students? I see Eduardo has his hand raised, then we'll go to Antoine.
I have a new one, another one. It's about the passport. My passport is going to expire in November 26. Is it a problem? Because it's when is the time that it's 6 months after we arrive in USA, or 6 months after the end of the program?
6 months into the future at the time of your entry. So it should be fine. And again, if it gets close to the expiration date, then you can certainly go through the passport renewal process. It is really important that you don't let it expire.
No, it's okay. I'm gonna.
Antoine.
Hi, good morning. I do have a few questions actually, so bear with me. So the first one was building on what Wilson asked around these self-employment cases for OPT extension. So I heard that the answer is probably someone interested in building something and doing some entrepreneurship will probably have to ask for change of visa 1 year after the completion of the program. I was curious to know, based on your experience and knowing that a lot of students doing the MSx actually do something like entrepreneurial activities after the program, I was curious to know, roughly, how many of them actually decide to go back to their home country because of visa questions, or actually get easily this new visa. So that would be one question. A second question is more related to significant other. So I was curious to know if, for example, my wife could work with a dependent visa for a non-US company with a non-US contract remotely. I guess there is no issue, but still I want to get your perspective on this. And very lastly, on the part-time study for significant other, I heard that my wife would be able to study part-time with this dependent visa. What are the kind of part-time study that she actually could think about or apply to, just to get a better understanding of the options, maybe in Stanford or out of Stanford?
So based on your questions, I'm assuming that you're gonna be applying for F1 visa. Is that correct?
I guess so. I'm still not fully clear about the decision criteria, to be
Okay.
honest.
Okay.
But yeah, I guess this is the assumption.
All right, so let's start with the first questions. We do certainly have students who are able to change their visa status to, like I said, O1, H1B, green card, so that they can move on with their startup. Again, depending on how the startup is structured, you might be eligible to apply for STEM extension, but that would be something that you will need to talk with us once it gets closer to that time period of application. In terms of F2 studying, they can certainly look around at different schools. There are a lot of schools that do offer a full-time program, but allow students to pursue the program on a part-time basis. So again, there are many universities and colleges around Stanford. So it's definitely an option that your wife can explore. In terms of working as an F2 dependent, even if it is for a foreign countries and doing a remote work, if the F2 dependent is physically in the US, they are not allowed to work. So that would be something to keep in mind.
So just to be super clear, so you're saying that for physical work in the US, they're not allowed, but if they're
Even
physically
for
present,
even if they are non-US entities and the companies are located outside the US, if your wife is certainly outside the US in your home country, then they can certainly work. But the minute that your wife steps into the United States, she would not be allowed to work.
wow, okay. Thank you.
Natasha, I think you're up next.
Hi, I was just trying to figure out the benefits of J1 versus F1, given that F1 provides a lot more flexibility and allows you to stay on in the US for some time. And I think the spouse and children ability to work and go to school might be one of them. But I just wondered what the other benefits of J1 over F1, just trying to decide which one to go for.
They're not that much. That would be the one benefit of having J1, which is spouse can work once they obtain a work authorization.
Okay, so for everything else, it's actually F1 is better.
And then, like I said, you have to become eligible to apply for J1, meaning that more than 50% of funding has to come from non-personal funding source.
But is it the case that J1 might take more quicker to process, or no, just it's the same? Okay, got it. Thank you.
Felipe. Oh, you're muted, Felipe.
Sorry. Going deeply on my first question, I was thinking if my family is waiting for the F2 visa, for example, could they travel with a tourist visa while they wait, or they just have to wait in Argentina till they get the F2 visa and can't travel with another one?
Of course, depending on when they are coming, if they already have an F2 visa, and if they want to visit you, once you already enter the US as an F1 student, then they can come here as an F2, not necessarily as a tourist visa, right?
But if they get first the tourist, because I don't know how which one will go faster, because I'm thinking that they will process both of them, the tourist visa and the F2 visa. So if they go through both visas and the tourist visa, I don't know, goes first, can they travel with that visa to visit me, or they have to wait for the F2?
Most likely F2 visa is gonna be processed faster.
Okay, so
Yeah.
perfect. And
And then I just wanted to point out that sometimes it takes really, really long time to get a visa appointment at the U.S. Embassy or U.S. Consulate. Majority of the U.S. Embassy and the consulates do have a process to expedite for F1 and J1 student appointments. And that they do have a certain process set up. Usually you will need to contact them directly through email. But again, you do need to check the specific process for each embassy and consulate that you're planning to go. But just don't be discouraged that you don't see the visa appointment slots available. Just reach out to the embassy or consulate and request for expedite as an F1 or J1 student.
Excellent, thank you.
I was going to mention on the My GSB site, we do have a link if you wanted to look at the wait times at various consulates and embassies in different cities around the world. It varies considerably depending on the country you're in. Sometimes if depending on which country, you might, instead of going to the capital, you might go to a different consulate. It might be faster, but so definitely check the wait times so you can plan ahead. And it's linked to the state. It's on the State Department website.
Yes, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Felipe. Do you have another question?
Yes, but I can wait. Don't worry.
Okay, well, let's go to Jose Tomas.
Thank you. Another question. For the case where people has more than one passport, is there, well, first, any recommendation in if there's differences between passports? But the specific question is, if you then want to transfer, for example, for an H1B1, and it's in a different passport where you got the F1, would it be difficult? Would you recommend to start with the passport you're planning to use ahead in case you need it? Or do you have any other comment on people who has more than one passport?
I don't know if you want to take that, Hannah.
Sure. So I can cover only for the visa application. So you have to decide which passport that you're going to use. And once you decide which passport you use, you have to apply visa with that passport. And when you submit all the documents in our portal, you have to make sure that you upload that passport copy.
In terms of changing the passport that you're going to use later on, it's not going to really impact your application, make that much difference.
Right, but I'm thinking like ahead when you finish the program, if you need to transfer, would it be a problem to, for example, you have your F1 in one passport and then you want to apply to H1B1, which is specific for two passports. So is it, permitted to switch passports even if you're the same person and you don't have to leave the US?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Oh, I think Caroline has her hand up.
Yeah. Actually, I have a question regarding tax status. Well, I will hold an F1 visa. Which taxes does it apply to? For example, the federal status, income tax, or some tax apply to the investment? Is there any links where I can find more information about this? Alternatively, would you recommend consulting with an attorney for guidance on this matter?
Yeah, certainly. So we people at Bechtel, we cannot answer any tax related questions. But if you in the United States for less than 5 years as an F1 student, then you'll be considered as a non-resident for tax purposes. And for non-resident for tax purposes, we do provide tax software the students can use to complete the tax return. So there are certain supports that we provide for international students.
Great,
But
thank you.
certainly for more complicated questions, you do need to talk with a tax accountant.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Antoine.
Yes, one additional question, again, SO related. So I heard that my wife wouldn't be in condition to work even for a non-US company with a non-US contract during the year of the program. In the case of the 1-year extension, so the first extension of, let's say, sorry, the OPT, the 12 months OPT, is there a world in which my wife during the MSx program can apply to another visa to be able to work during the year that follows the MSx?
Yes. So it's just that she would not be allowed to work in the US as an F2 dependent. If she obtains a different types of visa that will allow her to work, such as H-1B, then she can certainly work, but just not as an F2 dependent.
But so the recommendation would be for her to maybe from scratch apply for H-1B or to go through the F2 dependent visa and then during the MSx apply for the H-1B.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, yes, dependents do come as F2 because that's the easiest way to come to the US. But certainly some dependents to find a job and then they go through the visa process to obtain an H-1B and then they change their status.
Understood. Thank you.
Jesus.
Hi, thank you. One question. My wife works for her family-owned business, and actually she's an investor there. Can she continue working there, or is it the same case that you already talked about, that she won't be able to work for her own company?
Once she enters the country as F2, she will need to stop.
Okay, thank you.
As a F2, sorry. If she obtains a J2 and has a work authorization, then she can work, but not as a F2. I just wanted to clarify.
Okay, so I should try, or I should apply for the J1 type visa?
Again,
that would be a recommendation?
that would be a conversation. Well, first of all, you need to become eligible to apply for J1, right? So more than 50% has to come from non-personal funding source. And then that will be a conversation you need to have with your wife because you will have 3 years or up to 3 years of work authorization as an F1 student, but only 12 months as a J1.
Okay, so for example, in my case, I will be sponsored by my employer.
Okay.
And our base case scenario is to come back to our home country.
Okay.
After graduation.
Okay.
So I guess, am I eligible for J1 or not?
If you're gonna be sponsored by a company, then yes, you are eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Natasha.
Hi, I'm also sponsored by my company, and the arrangement with my spouse and my child is that they will come and visit, maybe 1 or 1.5 months at a time. So would you recommend that they get a dependent visa or just a regular tourist visa? We do intend to enroll my daughter into part-time school or summer camp, whichever is applicable.
I would say applying for dependent visa is gonna be much better.
Okay, and even though my husband will probably work remotely while he's here, would you say that the J visa would be more applicable?
And I'm gonna be working in the US?
But remotely, as in for a Malaysian company.
Well, if and are you applying for J1 or F1?
I will be eligible for
Okay.
J1.
Okay. So again, if you are coming here as a J1, then your dependents can certainly apply for J2 work authorization that will allow your dependent to work freely.
Okay. So that's better than him applying for like a regular tourist visa. Okay, got it. Thanks.
There's a question in the chat. I don't know if you, Hannah, I don't know if you can see it. It's from Gabriel. He's talking about if he has two passports and if there's an advantage of using one over another. He has a Colombian and Spanish passport. Is there recommendations on which one he should get his visa under?
Not really. I would say the only difference would be if you have a Canadian passport, then you are exempt from going to a visa appointment. So if you have a dual citizenship between Canada and some other country, then I would say maybe it's easier to use a Canadian passport. But other than that, the process, the restriction requirements, all the same.
Thanks. Eduardo.
Yes, another one. It's about am I eligible for the J1? I'm an entrepreneur. Is considered that my company is sponsoring me. Is that personal funding or is it for my company?
Hannah, do you want to answer the question?
So if your company covers the tuition and cost of living, then you're eligible for the J1 visa. So
Okay.
more than 50% of the funding has to come from non-personal funding. And if your company is sponsoring you, then yes, you're eligible for the J1 visa.
Thank you.
Other questions? Jose Tomas.
Just to be clear, you said that if you enter prior to 30 days as a tourist, you have to depart and then re-enter. You can't stay. Like if you arrive 32 days, then you have to depart and then re-enter. You can't just stay and switch to your new status.
That is correct.
While if anybody else has a question, I was going to ask if you guys want to elaborate a little bit on what constitutes proof of funding and if there are, because I remember in years past, there were questions about how old the documentation can be and if it's in a different currency or translation. Maybe you can give a little guidance to the students about what would constitute proof of funding in the timeline on when the funding has to, the dates of documentation.
So we take the documents that is not older than 6 months. So if the document is less than 6 months old, then we'll take it as a funding document, valid funding document.
And do they have to, what happens if it's in euro or a different currency? How does that work? And do they need to get a formal translation if it's not in English?
I would greatly appreciate it if you kind of calculate the currency and then just write it down on the statement. That'll be really helpful. But still, I can just go to Google and then just simply calculate. So, I mean, even your own currency is fine.
She's being extremely nice, but to make the things easier for her and her team, we will really appreciate if you can put the US equivalent of US dollars and also translation to English.
Eduardo, I don't know if your hands, if you have a new question? No? Okay. Anything else? Because we have a few minutes left. Okay, Felipe.
Yes, I have a question. I don't know if I have the right understanding about it, but what should be, or for example, my family business, I work for my family business and they will fund for the MSx. And what will be an example of proof of funding? How does the whole process work with this about the funding thing?
So letter of support from your company is going to be sufficient.
So it has to be on the letterhead. It has to be
Okay.
on the letterhead.
Okay. Excellent.
And they should have the amount that they are going to sponsor you and for the duration.
If the amount is for the whole program, should I put exactly the amount in US dollars or just say
no.
full program?
I mean, either way is fine. If it is clearly stated that they're going to be funding you fully for tuition and living expenses, that's fine. But they also need to know how much it's going to cost, right?
Okay, so I have to put both things, for the full program and tuition and everything, and also the amount.
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
I don't know if there's any other questions. Otherwise, we can give you a few minutes back. But anything else? All right. Well, we will be, as I mentioned, this recording will be posted. So if you want to go back and review any of the material, it'll be on my GSB. And you will get to know Hannah and Junko very well over the next few months as we go through the visa process. But in my experience, they have been incredibly supportive and very fast. So I think all of you will be, I know everyone's a little nervous about it, but it will actually go by very, very smoothly and hopefully quickly. But oh, I see Rohit has a question.
Hi, so I just quickly wanted to check in terms of proof of funds. So the stock statement, would that work? Because a lot of these funds are invested in different accounts. So do we need to like temporarily transfer some of that into a bank account to give you a bank statement, or even the stock statement would work?
Yeah, we take stock statement as long as it can be liquidated easily. Yes, we take it the stock statement as well.
Understood. Okay, thanks.
And it doesn't have to be in a one account. It can be multiple, as long as the total amount exceeds the required amount.
Okay, understood. And if I have one more quick question, so I work for a US employer and I do have some US stocks lying in a US Morgan Stanley account. So and of course I have my Indian source of funds. So any implication from a tax perspective? While I understand you can't really give tax advice, but any kind of preference that domestic funds are better or something which is already there in the US that may have some adverse implication?
No, I can't really comment on the tax implication, but there's no difference between US funding versus foreign funding. As long as you have the enough funding to cover your expenses, that's all it matters.
Understood. Thank you.
Antoine.
Yes, thank you. And one very last question on my end. On OPT and OPT extension, I just had a doubt, a last minute doubt. Is it, as you said, that there is for F1 visa, the possibility of working 12 months for OPT and then an extension of 24 months, meaning 3 years post completion of the MSx, or is it 1 year during the MSx plus 2 years after the completion of the MSx?
Majority of students wait to use the OPT until they graduate. So 3 years after you complete your program.
So I'm a bit confused because you said during the MSx, correct? The OPT during the MSx. So
you
then
do
the
have an
extension.
option. So you do have an option to use some of the OPT time before you graduate.
Yeah.
But you don't have to. As an F1 students, there are other work authorization that's available for students. But again, majority of students do wait to use OPT until they graduate. So 1 year OPT upon completion of MSx, and then 2 additional years, so 3 years total.
Including the 1 year program, the MSx.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it will be
after you can't
after you.
Yeah, you won't be working during your MSx experience, so your OPT will kick in after graduation.
Yeah.
And isn't
okay?
there?
I was
just going to say, there's also you have to be a student for at least 3 quarters, is from my understanding.
That's correct.
Yeah, so you're not even eligible to work for the
Yeah.
majority of your time in MSx.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Right. Well, I think we're good, and I wanted to thank both Hannah and Jungo for coming and sharing all this great information. We will be keeping you abreast of once the cost of attendance is finalized. So once that happens, we will kick off the visa process. So it should be sometime in March, and we'll let you know as soon as it comes available.
And we look forward to meeting you at Stanford.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. It was great
Thank
seeing
you.
you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.